My name is Evangeline Mercer, and on August 4th, 2012, my life changed forever. I never thought much about death. As a respiratory therapist, I had spent years working in hospitals, tending to patients in their most vulnerable moments. I had held the hands of people taking their last breaths. I had whispered prayers over them, sometimes out loud, sometimes only in my heart. I had seen families plead with God for miracles, watched pastors lay hands on the sick, and heard mothers cry out in desperation. But if I'm being honest, I wasn't sure if it really mattered. I believed in God, I always had. I went to church when I could, said my prayers before bed, and thanked Him when things were going well. But I never felt anything when I prayed. It felt like a habit, like talking into empty space, like sending letters into the wind, hoping someone would hear them. I had seen so many people pray for healing and still lose their loved ones. I had prayed for my own patients, only to watch them slip away despite my words. And deep down, I carried a question I was too afraid to ask out loud. Does prayer actually change anything? I never expected to get my answer in the way that I did. Because on that day I died. For 7 minutes and 42 seconds, my heart stopped. I left my body. I saw what lies beyond this world. And in that time I learned the truth. I saw prayers, real, living, tangible forces, moving through the universe, shaping reality, altering lives. I met an angelic being who showed me how every prayer ever spoken still exists, actively working through time itself. And when I came back, I knew I could never see life the same way again. Before that day, my faith was comfortable. I believed in God. I read the Bible. But my prayers were empty, hollow whispers, spoken more out of obligation than belief. As a respiratory therapist, I spent my days working with patients struggling to breathe, people hooked up to ventilators, fighting for air, clinging to life. I saw suffering up close every single day, and I saw people praying through that suffering. Some prayed with unwavering faith, declaring healing over their loved ones. Others prayed in desperation, clinging to God as their last hope. And some, like me, prayed out of habit because it was what you were supposed to do. But what I didn't understand then, what I never truly grasped, was that prayer was not just words. It was power. I didn't know that yet, but I was about to find out. It was a normal day, a quiet, sunny afternoon in August. I had worked a long shift the night before, treating patients with respiratory failure. I was exhausted, running on nothing but caffeine and routine. I don't even remember the impact. One moment I was merging onto the highway. The next, everything was gone. The driver of the truck never saw me. He had worked back-to-back shifts, running on fumes, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. When his semi drifted into my lane, there was no time to react. The force of the impact was unimaginable. Metal twisted around me. Glass shattered. The sound of crunching steel filled my ears. And then silence. The paramedics later told me that when they arrived, they thought no one could have survived. And for a time they were right. I was dead. The first thing I remember after the crash was floating. I felt no pain, no fear, no confusion, just weightlessness. I was hovering above the wreckage, looking down at the scene below me. I saw my own body crumpled in the driver's seat, blood running down my face. The paramedics were frantically working, trying to revive me. One of them was pressing hard on my chest, shouting for a defibrillator. Another was yelling, "No pulse." I should have felt panic. I should have been afraid. But instead I felt peace. A strange knowing settled over me. I was dead, but I wasn't gone. Then from beyond the wreckage, something else caught my eye. A light, brighter than anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just glowing. It was alive. And suddenly I was being pulled toward it. The moment I entered the light, everything changed. I was no longer standing in a wrecked car. I was in a vast, infinite space, filled with colors and sounds I had never experienced before. But what caught my attention first were the streams of light. Everywhere I looked, rivers of shimmering energy moved through the air, swirling, twisting, stretching across the horizon. Some were bright, powerful, and strong, while others were weak, barely reaching beyond the atmosphere before fading away. And then I heard it. Prayers. I wasn't just seeing them, I was hearing them. Each stream of light carried whispers, cries, praises, and pleas. Some were spoken with desperation, some with deep faith, and some without conviction at all. I realized with shock and awe, these were the prayers of people on earth. Prayers weren't just words. They were real, tangible forces, moving through time and space, actively changing reality. I watched as a woman prayed for her sick child, and I saw the prayer wrap around the little boy like a golden shield, strengthening his body on a cellular level. I watched as a man prayed for wisdom in his marriage, and his prayer formed a pathway of light leading to his wife's heart, softening her pain, bringing healing to their relationship. And then I saw something that broke me. I saw my own prayers from the past, small, weak, doubtful whispers that barely left the ground before fading away. I had spent years praying without believing. I had spoken empty words, not realizing that faith is what gives prayer its strength. As I stood there, overwhelmed by what I was seeing, I felt a presence beside me. I turned, and before me stood a being of light, tall, radiant, more powerful than anything I had ever encountered. "Evangeline, you have been brought here to understand," he said. His voice wasn't heard. It was felt, resonating deep within my soul. I somehow knew who he was. "Gabriel?" I whispered. He nodded. "You have doubted the power of prayer. But now you will see the truth." I stood there, overwhelmed, staring at the endless waves of light that surrounded me. These were prayers, living, moving, changing reality itself. Some shone brightly, stretching out like powerful beams, while others flickered, struggling to rise. It was as if I were looking at the unseen mechanics of the universe, witnessing how every whispered plea, every desperate cry, every quiet word of gratitude became part of something greater. Gabriel turned to me, his presence both overwhelming and comforting. "Evangeline, you have been brought here to understand what you have always questioned." I could barely speak. "I don't understand. How is this possible? I thought prayers were just words." Gabriel smiled, and with a wave of his hand, a vision appeared before me. I saw a mother in a hospital room, clutching the frail hand of her child, praying with all her strength. The energy from her prayer rushed upward like a golden flame, surrounding the child's body, mending unseen wounds, strengthening his cells. Then I saw a man alone in a dark room, whispering a prayer for forgiveness. His words were quiet, almost hesitant, but as they left his lips, they formed a stream of blue light, wrapping around him like an embrace, dissolving the chains of guilt and shame that bound his soul. Prayer is not merely asking, Evangeline. It is creation. It is power. It moves, it breathes, it transforms. I watched in stunned silence as another stream of light appeared. A woman in a car, stuck in traffic, muttering a half-hearted prayer for help but barely believing it herself. The light from her prayer was thin, almost transparent, struggling to rise. But what happens when someone prays without faith? I asked, my voice shaking. Gabriel's expression grew somber. Faith is the breath that gives prayer its strength. Without it, prayer is weak like a candle in a storm. But when spoken with belief, with expectation, it is unstoppable. I turned to him, tears in my eyes. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I didn't know it worked like this." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "But now you do." And with that, the vision shifted. Before I could speak, Gabriel gestured toward something in the distance. An endless structure, glowing with a golden radiance. I stepped closer, my heart pounding as I realized what I was looking at. A vast library stretched before me, infinite in size, filled with something that wasn't quite books, but wasn't quite light either. They pulsed, living, breathing. I could feel them as if each one contained a heartbeat. Gabriel led me inside, and the moment we stepped through the entrance, I heard them. Prayers. Some whispered. Some cried out. Some filled the space with pure, unwavering faith. "This," Gabriel said, his voice reverent, "is the prayer repository, the record of every prayer ever spoken. They do not fade, they do not disappear. Every prayer still exists, shaping the past, the present, and the future." My breath caught in my throat. Every prayer. Every single one. I stepped forward, reaching out, my fingers hovering over the nearest glowing volume. As soon as I touched it, a vision exploded before me. I saw a man in the 1800s, kneeling beside his sick wife, praying desperately for her healing. And then I saw how his prayer was still working generations later, blessing his great-great-granddaughter, a woman he never met, who was miraculously spared from the same illness. I pulled my hand back, my mind spinning. Prayers don't die. Gabriel shook his head. They live, continuing to work even when the one who spoke them is long gone. Prayers do not operate within the bounds of time. I collapsed to my knees, overwhelmed by what I was seeing. I've wasted so many prayers, I whispered. I spoke without belief. I barely tried. Gabriel knelt beside me. Then now you understand why you were brought here. I looked up at him, tears running down my face. What do I do? His eyes softened. You must go back. My heart dropped. I didn't want to go back. I had never felt peace like this before. I had never seen so clearly. Gabriel, please let me stay. He smiled, but there was sorrow in his eyes. It is not your time, Evangeline. There is work for you still. I turned back to the infinite library of prayers, to the streams of light still moving through the spiritual realm. I wanted to stay and learn, to see more, to witness how it all worked. But then I saw something else. I saw my mother sitting in the hospital waiting room, clutching my hand, praying over my body. I saw my sister crying, begging God not to take me. I saw their prayers, reaching me even now, forming golden threads tying me back to the living world. And I knew I had to go back. Gabriel placed a hand over my heart. Go. And tell them what you have seen. The light around me exploded. I woke up to the sound of a heart monitor beeping. My lungs burned as I gasped for air. The hospital lights were blinding, my body aching, the world feeling heavy and small after what I had just experienced. My mother let out a sob, gripping my hand as tears fell onto my skin. You're awake, she whispered. Oh, Evangeline, we thought we lost you. The doctor later told me I had been dead for 7 minutes and 42 seconds. They had been moments away from calling my time of death. But I knew the truth. I hadn't come back on my own. I had been sent. After I left the hospital, I could no longer live the same way. I prayed differently. I no longer saw prayer as a ritual, but as a force, a creative, living power that moves through time itself. I began teaching others about what I had seen, showing them how prayer isn't just words, but part of God's design for shaping the world. And every time I prayed, I did it with faith, with certainty, with understanding. Because now I knew. Prayer isn't just speaking. It is breathing life into reality itself. What if every prayer you've ever spoken is still out there, still working, still unfolding across time? What if the words you whisper today could change the future long after you're gone? Let me tell you this. Prayer is real. It is powerful. And it is shaping the world in ways you cannot see. So pray boldly. Pray with faith. And if this story has touched you, share it. Because someone out there needs to hear that their prayers are already working in ways beyond their imagination.